My son was shot out here by a Richmond police officer who is important to me because my son was unarmed. My son was a good kid, and the policeman started a bunch of confrontation with him, and now they're trying to slander his person and make this into him reaching for the officer's weapon case, where we have lots of witnesses to say otherwise from what the cop's statement is. My son was a good member of the community here, had lots of friends here, and that particular night a lot of them were here. This is a local gathering spot for those kids and adults here. When my son's a young man, and the cop snuck up on him, parked his car in the back, walked around, harassed a lot of them, because they didn't like the people loitering around here. My son was in the store talking to the people inside, the store workers, and the cop asked him to go outside, and he proceeded to harass him, and as I might have said, my son was intoxicated, but still not illegal last time I knew. And there was several people out here that were just as intoxicated, but they tended to single him out and harass him. According to what I understand, he was cooperative with the police, as in hands on his head and walking out here to the curb. He cooperated with them, got searched, and sat down on the curb afterwards. Cop was checking him for warrants and stuff, and either my son got frustrated and walked, or the policeman told him he could leave. That's the story I'm hearing. And the policeman wasn't sure of, or may not have been sure of his residence, thinking he lived up here on Steed Street, when in fact he lived down on Spring Street, which is on the other side of the railroad tracks here. And so the cop proceeded to attack him from behind when he thought he was walking the wrong direction, created the whole confrontation, and all my son was trying to do was defend himself. And the cop, well, I think some of the last words out of my son's mouth were, what are you doing with a gun? Please don't shoot. And the policeman shot him dead.
My plight here, and the plight of the family, is to bring awareness to the police brutality, and that the situation with my nephew didn't have to happen. The officer had other means that he could have used instead of his weapon. When they make a choice like that, it's final, and there's no going back. And with Pedie, he didn't do anything. According to the eyewitness testimonies, they said Pedie was completely innocent in the whole scenario. So the video that I had seen, where the officer yanked him down from the back of his shirt after being released. Now, once again, I'm going to state that this was according to the eyewitness testimony. He had been released to go home. The officer made a mistake in the address. The officer said he lived at 598 Steed, and Pedie lived right here at 598 Spring Street. So when Pedie got up and began to walk home, the officer thought he was being defiant because Pedie had to go walk past the liquor store door. And I believe that he yanked Pedie down with an attitude of, how dare you defy me? Because Pedie was completely compliant prior to that whole scenario, and Pedie was just wanting to go home as he was released to do so. And then a struggle ensued, and instead of the officer going for a taser, which he left in his locker, he didn't go after his baton. Apparently that was left at work as well. He didn't deploy his canine dog and all he had to do was push a button on his shirt to deploy the dog. He chose a lethal means in which to take Pedie down, which didn't have to happen. And had that not happened, we wouldn't be here today doing all of this. This has affected the whole family. We are beside ourselves with the death of Pedie. Pedie, I'll give you a background of who Pedie was. Pedie always gave of himself. When he didn't have much money, he would pawn his chains so he could help Charlie Mae stay in her place when she was going to be evicted. He could help other people with their groceries. He would go buy packs of cigarettes and come out of the store and ask anybody, do you want a couple cigarettes? Do you want some cigarettes? Because he knew that they had no money. And where other people laughed at him, Pedie wanted to just give from his heart. And he could have stayed in his protected neighborhood in Pinole, but he chose to be down here with all of these people that he called family. He stays here because he helped another homeless guy have a place to live. He didn't have to be down here, but that was Pedie's heart. He had a brand new pair of tennis shoes, and he wore them the first day. And he saw one of his friends, and his friend's shoes were worn out and holey, and Pedie gave him his own shoes right off of his feet because the other guy had nothing. And Pedie, when he did that, he didn't know that he had any shoes to go home to. But thank God his mom had tucked some away for him, so he wore his old shoes for months until he was able to get another pair of shoes. But it wasn't because he came from a privileged lifestyle. These guys work hard for what they have, and Pedie worked hard for what he had. And he gave of himself in this family trucking business that with the economy has gone downhill as well. They have their struggles, and Pedie came here and made sure he worked with his dad to help out. Now they're working 7 days a week down here to make up for what they lost. They don't have time to mourn this great loss. They're fighting to get the word out because the police aren't doing it. They have to protect their own. And unfortunately, it's sad that those who want to encourage us don't have a voice that they can encourage us. Not all officers are bad. 99% of them, I would say, are good. But the 1% that are not are bringing the whole establishment down, and everything looks bad right now. So we need to get this to change. Officers need to rise up and use their voice. The good officers need to do this somehow. And I understand that there's a bureaucracy behind what they can and cannot do. But if you have strength in numbers, the more that do it, eventually we can get rid of the bad ones and keep all the good ones. It's time for change, and we need to start today. And this officer, Wallace Jensen, needs to be put in jail for what he did. He needs to be tried, fairly tried, by a court of peers, not a court of police officers policing themselves. He needs to be tried for what he did, and he needs to own what he did as well. Since this all began, from day one, we had to start defending Pedie. The Richmond Police Department posted stuff on their Facebook, and it appeared to me that the officer already called his friends and had his friends go on there to give their comments. And I told the captain, wow, it seems really suspicious here. Your officer seems guilty when all of his friends are on here, predominantly Hispanic people, and 30-plus-year-old men saying, oh, I hope the officer's okay. Thank you, officer. And started to demonize my nephew. And it was at that time that I went in full attack mode to defend my nephew, defend his honor. But it doesn't get better. It just continues. The momentum continues because they've already created doubt in the community, in the minds of the community, and it's up to the family now to really state other facts that they're not getting. And during the inquest hearing in December, on December 10th, it was a dog and pony show. So we were waiting outside for them to open the room in which we had to go into. And once we walked in, the whole back row was seated full of other officers, district attorneys, and whoever else was a part of their dog and pony show. The judge himself was a part of them. They allowed the officer to state his lies. They allowed another officer to state his lies, and nobody else had anything else to say. There was no witnesses on Pedie's behalf because it was all about the police officers policing themselves. And people need to be aware that as much as we love our law enforcement and we need them, there's a whole nother side to these scenarios that you're not privy to unless you go through something like this. Do you have something to say?
We noticed how the police force very much act like they have a no snitch policy on themselves, much like the ghetto has, and they won't talk about anything that was wrong about them guys. And the few that have, which we've had a few of them come up to us and say that Wallace Jensen was not the best representation of the Richmond Police Department, and if anybody was going to put a blemish on their record, everyone could point a finger towards him. I had several officers say the same thing, pointing to his academy record and stuff like that. I understand he's trained professionally in crisis negotiation, and for him to shoot my son dead, I don't know of any time anyone's ever had to negotiate with a dead man and never lost the argument. So also we've had other police officers come up and say to keep up the good work we're doing, as in they don't like how things are coming down, yet they are unable to speak about it because of that blue code of silence. And it's not right that they even have anything like that. There should be citizen review committees, people that aren't bound by the brotherhood or the gang, as I see them as. They all they are doing is protecting their selves and slandering my son, and we've seen this all too often with all the other cases. Just lately, Ferguson, they came out saying how the police department is guilty of heinous racist scenarios, yet the policeman himself, Darren Wilson, isn't part of it. Well, you know, it's none of that would have happened. A person should have never been shot to death over cigarettes. The cop should have disciplined himself as into how he confronted him. They knew who he was. They had a thing on him. He should have got some backup before he even confronted him. You know, I can't judge that case straight up like that, but I can say that about my son. The police should have had backup. They should have had non-lethal force, and we wouldn't be having this interview. We'd probably be defending my son in a court for another set of lies that the police would give out there. The latest chant about the kid in Wisconsin, which happened yesterday, the day before, they're saying, "Who don't we trust? The police." And that's exactly how I feel right now. These guys got the authority to impose their will upon us, and it's like they're beating us down. It ain't no undifferent than being a pimp and knocking his woman down. They're doing it to the general public because they want their way. They want people to comply to their vision of what things should be. Yet there's other visions out here, other people that live their lifestyles the way they do. Maybe it doesn't conform to what they like and in the neighborhoods they live in, but we're in Richmond, and it's a different community, and if they were part of the community, they would know how people act in this community. They are not part of this community. They all live in different neighborhoods, And
away from this community.
Away from this community. They talk about it like it's a scuzz hole, which it has this criminal element and stuff, but everybody's equal in the eyes of the Lord, and we don't need them to come down here and judge us as we're all criminals just because we live here. The police officer knew my son was unarmed, yet pursued this with fatal force, and that's the part that's why we have this lawsuit going.
And once again, all he had to do was state that Pedie was going after his weapon and he was in fear of his life. It's the same excuse that they're hearing all over this nation. It's got to change. He had Pedie in a tactical maneuver where Pedie's head was in his stomach, and he was bending Pedie's head downward as if to snap his neck. And Pedie had to push him off, and he was screaming in pain. Eyewitnesses told us. He was screaming in pain, and he pushed him off, and he said, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." Well, once again, this particular officer felt he was above the law. Now, and going back to what Rick said, he also lives in Vacaville. He's nowhere near this area. He doesn't know these people, but yet these people in this area are prejudged by many. Instead of knowing them for who they are, they just prejudge them as nothing. They're insignificant people, and that is not the case at all. So things need to change. And this same old garbage line of, he was going after my weapon, I was in fear of my life. He stated in the Inquisition, is that it?
Inquest.
Inquest. He stated in the inquest that he felt something bumping his gun. So he was looking around, taking the time to look around. Well, there were no bushes. There wasn't a mailbox sitting there. There were no trees sitting there. What would it be bumping into? What would you have to stop and think about unless you're lying? In my opinion, it was just a bold-faced lie to justify what he did and to create doubt in the community so that we have to fight the fight to prove otherwise. It's got to stop. And this guy is known, once again, to not be a great officer, so why was he hired? Why was he allowed to pass the test? I mean, these tests are supposed to be in depth, yet he made it through. Why? The system is broken, needs to be fixed. They need to change their guidelines. They need to become stricter. Something needs to change.